On his way, devil is on his way, devil is on his way, motherfucker, the devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees, devil is on his way, fall to your knees, devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees, devil is on his way, motherfucker, he's on his...
Hey y'all, welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
A little late with part 2.
Oh, well, who keeps track of time anymore?
Time.
What is time? Time is
Exactly.
subjective.
It's just like sand through an hourglass.
It is. These are the days of our lives.
Oh, Dylan, we got a fantastic comment on Instagram, and it was pretty cool. I wanted to share it with you guys. We have a brand new listener follower, and she was like, it's not every day you see a podcast about your kin. So I automatically followed. Her great-grandma was a Pritchard from Caldwell County, North Carolina, and she's heard that story of the bushwhackers. Remember Mr. Blaylock, Keith Blaylock?
Yeah.
And his wife, and they were bushwhackers during the Civil War. She's like, I've heard this story in my whole life because it's
In
part
her
of her
family lore.
history. Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
she said we did an awesome job, but I thought that was so cool. I love when we are able to highlight a story and then have someone come forth with a bit of information about it.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. And even years and years later, these types of comments and discoveries still warm our hearts, right?
It's pretty cool. One of our Discord family, one of our patrons, let us know in our Discord chat that her mom was from Wilkinsburg and that she was 13 when Beth Barr was abducted. So if you listen to our Thanksgiving Crimes podcast, you would know the case we're talking about. It was a missing persons case. Beth Barr was abducted, and her mother lived only about 5 minutes from the elementary school that's now closed. So it's a kind of a wild tie-in there, Dylan, isn't it?
It's a small crime world out there, right?
It is. Yeah. It's pretty neat when you make those connections with folks.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so here we are for Dahmer Part 2.
Oh, Dylan. Yeah, we're diving in.
And Heather is just finding out stuff left and right we didn't know about Dahmer.
Well, there's a lot about Dahmer just in my research that I didn't know, and hopefully we will shed some light for you guys, because I know it's been a story that has been told many, many times by many, 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 many different people.
Wow, that's a good way to describe it.
Yes.
Yes, it's been told many times by many different people, but it is always interesting to learn new things.
Exactly. So are you ready for Dahmer Part 2?
You go on, get ready now.
By now, Dahmer is in full-fledged serial killer mode.
So he's completely off the rails. It seems at this point he's finding it hard to control his compulsions.
Like a predator hunting at night, Dahmer made the rounds at Milwaukee's gay nightclub establishments. In March of 1988, Jeffrey met a young Mexican man named Richard Guerrero. The 25-year-old led a secret life from his family, and even after his death, they would not acknowledge that he was gay. He was the youngest of 6 kids and last seen on the 24th of March by his family. Dahmer met Guerrero at the Phoenix Bar, which is a gay club in Milwaukee. It's come up in episode 1, and we will hear about it quite a bit in episode 2. Now, the pair returned to Catherine's house. Remember, Catherine is the grandmother.
Oh my God, grandma's basement. It's not good.
No, they returned to Catherine's house to watch videos, take photos, and have sex. At the house, they had oral sex. Then Jeffrey drugged Guerrero with sleeping pills. When the man was finally asleep, Jeffrey strangled him, then had sex with his body. Afterwards, he dismembered the man and disposed of the body as he had done before. Dahmer did not keep any of the body parts from this murder.
Yeah, I wonder what would compel him to do that. I guess sometimes he just felt like keeping a piece of them around or something.
Who knows, Dylan? I mean, really.
And you know, it's
hard to say.
Atmosphere around even the conversation about gay and gay things. I'm trying to say it right.
Homosexuality.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying it. Dahmer used that fact that people weren't comfortable with that to his advantage at every point, every time when he would have interactions with police, and some, like I'm sure he was aware of some of these guys come and were a part of this community and didn't tell their family and stuff, which he's, had some of that go on in his own life. So I find it very interesting. I think that helped fuel this to a degree in certain ways.
The veil of secrecy.
Yes.
In which Dahmer was able to operate and also prey on victims who had these secrets that they kept.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, good job, Heather.
Well, I mean, I totally see what you're saying, Dylan, and it makes sense.
And that's sad.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think Dahmer was a lot smarter than people give him credit for.
He was quite a bit more cunning because, at first they were just making him out like he's just this, and he is goofy. He's kind of a doober. Wouldn't you say?
He totally is. He's the most boring fucking person on the planet, as I've mentioned before.
But it's almost like when he would end up in these very high pressure situations, intense situations, he's able to think on his feet.
Yes. I mean, I would definitely say he's a psychopath. Because he is...
Most people would freak out.
He is manipulative, cunning, and can totally keep it together when everything is crumbling around him. Whereas I think most people would panic, start feeling pangs of guilt, suspicion.
Or just the fear of being discovered, that close.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, but only a psychopath can be in that situation and just be calm as a cucumber.
Yeah, and he totally was.
Or is that cool as a cucumber?
Well, either way, Dylan, we get what you're trying to say.
Cucumbers don't ever cause problems.
If I correct you at every turn, we would never get through a case.
Cucumbers really are calm as a cucumber. So if that's not a saying, because they never cause any problems. They're just over there hanging out, waiting to be part of a crispy salad.
It's true.
Okay.
I love cucumbers. One of my favorites.
All right.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Richard Guerrero had a criminal record dating back to age 10 for petty crimes. His brothers were also known to law enforcement. So when he was reported missing, his sister said the police didn't take it too seriously. Although he had been arrested for prostitution, his sister refused to believe he had any kind of secret life. She said he worked at a downtown pizzeria and spent the rest of his time with family. He was always broke and had 3 girlfriends, according to his sister. Richard was known to clean his mother's house and run errands for her, very close with his mother. The only way he would be inside the gay club, his sister said, was because he was cold waiting for a bus. Richard was really good about staying in contact with his mother, even when he spent the night with friends or his sister. The first thing he would do when he arrived at a place is to call his mother and let her know he was safe. So when they didn't hear from him and mom didn't hear from him, I mean, they definitely knew something was wrong.
Well, yeah, when you have these habits with people, and I think it was a lot more common occurrence back then because you didn't have cell phones and constant communication. You just call me, let me know you're okay, or let me know when you get there. I still do that.
And we see a pattern, as in many true crime cases, we see patterns where law enforcement do not take missing persons cases seriously, especially if that person has had any kind of criminal charges or, has gotten into any kind of trouble. They're automatically dismissed, and it's, they probably ran off.
Well, this guy's got 2, and the cop's eyes, 2 strikes against him. Criminal history, and he's possibly gay and prostitution charges. These cops they're going to write him off twice as fast.
When Richard left his mother's home that night around 11 p.m., he was headed to a friend's house. The friend was a known drug dealer and had only 2 weeks before Richard had been in the hospital. He and his girlfriend had overdosed on some pills and had to stay in the hospital for 2 days. So again, I mean, there's speculation that maybe Richard was into things his family was not aware of, like the drugs and possibly, either he was gay or he was bisexual, and kind of living this secret life.
When you were describing that, his sister's kind of denials of possibly his lifestyle, in my head, I was imagining like a Leslie Nielsen. Is that right?
Leslie Jordan? Is that? The
The
person?
shit. I'm sorry. It's like Top Gun and all that shit.
Oh, that is Leslie Nielsen.
Yeah, one of his movies.
Yes.
And like there's just more and more proof that he's gay. He keeps like falling out of the guy's belongings as they're talking to the family, like a membership card or like where he's the manager, Is that funny? I'm sorry.
It is, but maybe not right at this moment, Dylan.
What?
Well, the thing with Guerrero's family, in my research, from what I understand, is that they were Catholic, and in their religion and among the community, which I believe he was Mexican, they did the homosexuality at this time was not as prevalent, or people weren't as open with it, and the fact that his like community is not really accepting of it, and then the fact that they're super religious and very Catholic, the guy definitely had to probably keep it a secret.
Oh yeah, even I
It
think
was not accepted.
to this day that might not be the most accepting and open communities to like alternative lifestyles. Catholic and Hispanic like that.
Well, and yeah, you get into cultures where there's a lot of a very traditional type of culture, and it seemed like he had come from a very like traditional Catholic household. Again, he's got like 6, 7 siblings. It's a really big family. They seem very traditional. So I think with some of these incidences or some of these situations that Dahmer finds himself in, that's another reason why the victims maybe didn't get justice right off the bat, or I don't know, because the community just at large wasn't very accepting of the homosexual lifestyle.
Oh, I think that's obvious. That plays a part many different times in this story.
Okay, I'm rambling. I'm going to get back to it.
Yeah.
Now, his family thought racism played a role in police's lack of involvement in this missing persons case. When a white woman disappeared in 1990, it was all over the news, but Guerrero never made any headlines. It was April 23rd of 1988 when Jeffrey Dahmer met a man named Ronald Flowers. Flowers had been living in Lake County, Illinois, and met Dahmer by chance in Milwaukee in 1988. He had come to the city to visit some friends and had been dancing at the nearby nightclub, Club 219. However, when Flowers went to get into his car, he was going to drive home, he discovered that it wasn't working, it wouldn't start, and his friends had already left. So he was essentially stuck with a broken down car in a strange neighborhood.
That would suck.
Very much.
You just danced your ass off at the club.
Yes, and you're tired.
You're tired. You've had a few drinks.
You just want to get home.
You just want to go home and drunk eat in the kitchen and go to bed.
It's true. You just want to eat some shredded cheese out of the bag.
Yeah.
2 a.m.
Exactly.
While the dog stares at you. Like, what a freak.
Yeah, but here you are stuck in this dark parking lot.
Yeah, with no cell phone, because this is 1988, so it makes it a lot more difficult to text your friend, call your friend.
Well, it's a lot bigger deal to be stranded.
Yeah.
And back in this time, back in the old days.
Well, this is when Dahmer shows up, poof, like a genie in a bottle.
It's okay, man. You want to drink some beer, take some photos?
Yeah, he's trying to be a good Samaritan, right? And he offers Flowers to come back to his grandmother's house nearby where they could get another car to help jumpstart his car. At Catherine's house, Dahmer managed to spike Flowers' drink, but Catherine called out to him. Now, remember, Grandma didn't allow Jeffrey to have visitors late at night, and she had overheard chatting between the two men downstairs. So she was not okay with this. And I don't blame her. I don't want strangers in my house either.
Well, no, especially if they're going to be murdered and dismembered.
Well, there's that. But see, she didn't know that was happening, Dylan.
So Jeffrey's having to hide the very presence of his victims from his grandmother and then all the other crazy shit he does. Nice.
It's a lot of sneaking around.
It is.
Considering his best options, Jeffrey decided he couldn't proceed with killing Flowers. Flowers was not in good shape. The sleeping pills had left him semi-unconscious, so he's pretty out of it. Dahmer decided to put Flowers in a cab, sending him off to the hospital. After the man was dropped off at the hospital and was able to sober up, Flowers immediately went to police to report the assault. He told officers he had been drugged and robbed. Police didn't take the report too seriously because Flowers was unable to recall the address, and police thought maybe it was just some kind of domestic quarrel.
or some drunken shenanigans, right?
Possibly. Once again, Dahmer seemed to evade justice. Every damn time.
Every single
It's like,
time.
what's it going to fucking take for this guy to get some time?
Well, it's always easy in hindsight to look at any situation, but I think definitely if someone had just caught something one of these times earlier, they definitely could have saved a couple of victims.
Although law enforcement wasn't involved, Catherine was growing weary of her grandson's lifestyle. Catherine noticed foul smells coming from the basement and didn't like strange young men cycling in and out of her home at all hours of the night. Plus, there was the alcohol abuse. And I can imagine any grandmother is not going to be okay with this situation. I mean, first of all, she's nice enough to open her home to Jeffrey, right? And it's her house, so obviously she's allowed to have her rules and expectations.
Well, yeah, of course.
And he's just totally taking advantage of this.
Well, I'm going to assume the reason most grandmothers or family open their home up to someone Jeffrey's age is to get on his feet, it seemed like his father did try multiple different times to get Jeffrey kind of pointed in a direction.
Sorry, I had to take a sip of soda if you heard me gulpy.
Give him some kind of direction in life. So she's opened her home for him to get stable on his feet, improve his situation in life, and he's out partying constantly, bringing people in and out. She doesn't like that. I mean, let alone the strange, foul, rancid odor emanating from your basement.
It's taxidermy hobby, man.
It's just somebody send me some pork chops. I'm sure people are so glad we're doing like one-liners from the series.
Jeffrey's addiction was growing worse. At first, he would try to hide his drinking, but now he was leaving behind beer cans and liquor bottles. They were all over his room and basement, just littered with empty bottles.
He's been abusing alcohol for a very long time at this point.
Yes.
Because he started, 12, 13 years old?
I mean, at this point, he's been drinking for like 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
And he's in his mid-20s. That's kind of crazy.
He seemed to no longer care if his family knew about the drinking. So again, Dylan, he's losing what little bit of self-control he has.
Yeah, he doesn't give a damn.
Catherine admonished her grandson, saying he wouldn't be able to live there, that he would have to go find a new place if he didn't stop the drinking. And although she heard young men come over to the house, she never seemed to hear them leave.
Is that something you would notice?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, would you? Yeah, I think you're the type of person that might catch that.
If my grandson just had guests over, but they never left, I'd be like, "What the fuck is this? The Hotel California?"
I would be assuming
Get
that
your ass out of here.
it was a party hole thing and that I didn't understand it. But I think I would miss that. They never left because I'm trying to avoid them and not have interactions anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in the kitchen drinking milk from the gallon in your underwear while like a stranger's like, "Oh hey,"
No.
and you're like, "I'm the man of the house."
Is that what I would do?
Probably.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
why I'm drinking this milk like this.
It's what you tell me when I walk in the kitchen. You beat your chest and tell me you're the man of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's okay, honey. Don't be embarrassed.
I don't do that.
Everybody has fantasies they like to live out. And if yours is being the man of the house, then good for you. Good for you.
You pointed out that I enjoy not being an adult and allowing you to do everything for me. But we'll talk about that some other
It's
time.
exhausting. Jeffrey was never disrespectful in the sense that he didn't raise his voice or argue with his grandmother. But at the same time, Dylan, he had no plans to change his lifestyle.
And that's in itself is the ultimate disrespect. When you just ignore everything someone's telling you about the rules, about their house, about their expectations. And we have dealt with that with our own child, your child. And
Now she's my child.
Yeah. I only claim her when she's doing good. But it's just ignoring you. Ignoring what you're telling them to do.
It's blatantly disrespectful.
Yeah, I think
if someone says, "I need you to do this for me," and you just look at them
like they
knowing,
didn't speak.
"I am never going to do this for you."
Yeah.
Yep. It's like a big fuck you. Now, finally, Lionel got involved, sitting down with Jeffrey and Catherine to lay out some ground rules, almost like a mediator. It was in September of 1988 that Jeff and his grandma decided the best course of action, Dylan, is for Jeff to move on out. She was like, "Hit the road, Jack."
And I agree with her. It might be for the best.
Go pay some rent, right? You're an adult.
And take your taxidermy with you, please. Please, because it's a lot. It stinks.
He moved into an apartment at 808 North 24th Street in Milwaukee. It was within walking distance to his job at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory. Dahmer had managed to hold on to that job for 4 years at this point, which was the longest, really, that he'd committed to anything, except being an alcoholic.
Yeah, he's dedicated to that.
Some might say the apartment was not particularly nice and was in a bit of a, rough neighborhood, high crime, little sketchy neighborhood, low income, which that doesn't always equal to high crime.
Oh, wow. Damn. Hot
I'm saying
take.
in this case,
So it was just a bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
And kind of a shithole apartment.
Yes.
Right. Those two are not correlations to each other. They just tend to entertain the same space.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Why are you trying to argue, Dylan?
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to sound smart.
It was on the afternoon that he moved into the apartment that Dahmer happened to meet a 13-year-old Laotian boy on the street, near his home. And this boy was walking home from school. And that's when Dahmer approached him, explaining he had a new camera that he wanted to try out. Then Dahmer offered the boy $50 to return to the new apartment for photos. A number of others had already turned Dahmer down.
Well, that's creepy.
He'd encountered people on the street before this boy, and they all told him no.
So $50 back then is a chunk of change.
Well, $50 is $50, Dylan.
Back then it was like that's a lot of money.
That's a meal at the Texas Roadhouse.
Yeah. So here he is.
I would take that $50.
Well, I would blow him off because that's really creepy. That's like cliche creepy. Hey, I got this camera. You want to help me try it out? Here's $50.
Not me. I'd be thinking about those rolls at the Texas Roadhouse.
So you would fall for it.
I'm just being silly. No, but one time, and this was so many years ago, I was just walking in downtown Asheville, shopping, and had a guy approach me and give me his card.
No.
And say I'm a photographer, give me the spiel, and you should call me sometime. We should book something. And he had a website. Well, this was early 2000s, and I had internet access, so I go look at the website. It was all nude. It was all nude photography.
Okay.
Like Lady Godiva, naked lady on a horse kind of thing. And I was
very
just
tasteful.
yeah, this isn't for me. And no, weird. But years later, when I had, I guess, a photography sort of social circle going on, I met that guy again, and I remembered him.
No way.
From back in the day. Isn't that funny?
And he really was a big photographer, and he could have made you rich.
But he really was a photographer, professional. But at the time, I was young and totally weirded out that somebody wanted me to be naked on a horse or something.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean he's not creepy, just because he really is a photographer, right?
He has a good reputation.
Oh.
I'm just saying a lot of people have worked with him that I know. But yeah, it was weird.
It is weird.
So it would be weird. Especially if they're here's $50.
And he's just I'm just a poor Laotian boy. Right?
Who says that?
That's what his victim says.
Oh my God, you're stupid. A number of others had already turned him down, as I mentioned, but this boy, learning that the apartment was only a block away, agreed to pose for Dahmer. Dahmer persuaded the boy to partially undress for 2 Polaroids. Then he kissed the boy on the stomach. Dahmer then physically removed the boy's genitals from his pants, telling him it'll make the photo look sexier.
Oh, wow. He got his nuts out.
Yeah.
Right?
He went full Mapplethorpe here. In the meantime, Dahmer had prepared the boy a cup of coffee and poured Irish cream in it. Of course, this also included some crushed halcyon tablets.
I was wondering if, oh wow, we have to let the spaceship get away from our house. I was wondering if it was halcyon that he was using when you kept saying sleeping pill, but how strong and how effectively this is knocking out these victims. It was a very dangerous, very super addictive sleeping pill back in the day. Do you remember?
I've heard of halcyon.
Yes. Yeah, it was very, very strong. Very strong. It would literally just put you out where people could move you around and shit, and you wouldn't know it.
Dang, that's what I need. Dahmer had procured the drug by telling his doctor he was suffering from insomnia.
Okay. He's a damn lie.
The boy was allowed to go home, but his family, the synthesophones, I know I'm going
There's syncophones?
synthesophones.
Oh, yeah. Let's just move his family.
I know.
Let's just move.
They knew something was horribly wrong because he was bumping into furniture, incoherent, barely able to speak. Eventually, he passed out and they were unable to rouse him, so the child was taken to the hospital. Doctors discovered he had been drugged and contacted law enforcement. The boy was finally revived and was able to give a good description of the man who had done this to him. The following morning, around 2:30 a.m., officers arrested Dahmer at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory. In Jeffrey's apartment, a coffee mug was found with traces of the drug Halcyon, along with the bottle of pills and a Polaroid camera. Dahmer told detectives it was hard to tell the victim's age, although the boy stated that he had actually mentioned to Dahmer he was a freshman in high school, like during their encounter.
Right.
He also claimed, this is Dahmer, that he had never touched or kissed the boy. The drugging, according to Dahmer, was purely accidental, as he always drank coffee from that particular cup and used it for his medication. So the drugs would be residual.
Okay. See, that's bullshit. I mean, we're really going to buy this?
He's able to spin some good ones.
And I'm telling you, it's always because in the back of their mind, these cops don't even want to be talking to this gay dude. I mean, really, but people back in the day were they acted almost like you could catch gayness. I mean, they were so
Immature and uneducated.
Yes.
Just ignorant.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
According to Jeffrey, the boy was fine when he had left the apartment. Jeffrey was arrested for sexual exploitation of a child and second-degree sexual assault. His bail was set at $10,000, which Lionel paid, and that's when Jeffrey returned to live with his grandmother once again.
Granny, I know that we had our differences.
He literally just moved into this apartment. The afternoon he moves in, this happens. So he spends one night in the apartment before he's like arrested and has to go back to his grandma's house.
I wonder if he even got his deposit back.
It's just so much.
Jeffrey's the fuck up. I mean, that's a big part of this story too. He's just directionless, depressed.
Loser. He's a
loser. He's a slacker.
And he's so fucking boring.
He's not going to apply himself
So boring.
to anything that is positive.
September 30th of 1988 was the preliminary hearing. Dahmer's was actually released, Dylan, on a $2,500 bail. Now, can you imagine how this family feels knowing that this creep predator who did this to their child is now back on the streets?
You know, I don't know that I'm going to bail my kid out on this one. These types of charges. You know, I'm sorry.
No, right?
Unless I absolutely believe I guess that's what a lot of times people say, not my kid. My kid's not capable of that. So maybe that's what happens.
A well-known defense attorney was hired by Lionel. The following January, he pled guilty to second-degree sexual assault and enticing a child for immoral purposes. He waited for the sentencing while at his grandma's house. So he is found guilty but has to wait a few months for the sentencing. And he's back at grandma's.
I bet Granny's like, I hope he gets sent down the river.
God, Granny's probably tired of his shit.
Yeah, she's like, I hope he gets 10 years, so at least he won't be at my house.
About 2 months after the court hearing, Dahmer found himself back in the gay bars. It was at Le Cage aux Folles.
Ooh.
Le Cage aux Folles that
The drinks
he
are so
met
salty
a
there.
24-year-old Milwaukee resident named Anthony Sears on March 25th of 1989. Sears managed Baker's Square restaurant and also aspired to be a model. Sears had a few shoplifting arrests along with one for fraudulent credit card use. He was a known bisexual, but he did have a girlfriend. Sears' friend Jeffrey Connor drove him, Dahmer, and a guy named Bob Keel, which was another friend, back to Catherine's house. Now, before Connor let Anthony and Dahmer go, he reminded Sears that he was going to spend time with his family on Easter and asked him to call me in case you need me. If you need a ride back home from this guy's house, let me know. So good friend, right?
Yeah, it's a great friend.
But that was the last time that he would ever see Anthony again. Now, according to his mother, Marilyn, who didn't know he was going to be dead, Anthony was planning to see her the next day to celebrate a recent promotion he had gotten at this Baker Square restaurant because he had been promoted to manager. So they were going to celebrate, but he never showed up.
How sad's that?
Very sad. These families, the waiting, the not knowing.
Well,
It's just really sad.
feeling like that no one's taking it seriously or, really trying to investigate properly your loved one's disappearance or death or whatever. It's just over and over again. It's the same story.
Because he wanted to be a model, his mother Marilyn described him as a, quote, photo fanatic. Sears was known to go off with friends for days at a time, so his mother didn't immediately report him as a missing person, though she was concerned that he didn't show up for their, little celebration.
Because she would expect there's no reason for him not to show up for that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if he wasn't going to make it, normally he would call and say, sorry, I'm out with friends or whatever. Dahmer offered Sears money to be photographed at Catherine's house. The pair had several drinks and then had sex. And this is until, Jeffrey drugs him. Then he strangles Sears and has sex with the corpse.
See? He's having we've said before, maybe if Jeffrey had found someone, had a normal relationship, some of this other stuff, bad stuff wouldn't happen. He's having a normal encounter with this guy. They're hanging out. It's going good. It sounds like consensual sex, whatever. But he still got to do this crazy shit. So I guess that's always his end goal.
Yes.
He claims that he didn't kill to kill. He killed to achieve this other goal of them not leaving typically. But I think that's bullshit. I think that's always his end goal is killing.
Well, he likes it.
He likes it, yeah.
Jeffrey then proceeds to dismember the corpse. He keeps the head and boils it in order to remove the skin.
My God.
He painted the skull gray in case it was discovered. He could say it was like a plastic model that medical students used. 2 years later, the skull would be discovered inside Jeffrey's apartment by law enforcement. Jeffrey would later say he enjoyed masturbating in front of the skulls, and that's why he kept them around.
Oh my God. That's not healthy.
While killing Sears, Dahmer was still being monitored by a Department of Probation and Parole psychologist. The psychologist wrote a letter to the judge stating that since Jeffrey had been attending their sessions together, he had become much more amicable, relaxed, and social, describing him as a person who has become more interested in participating in the community.
Okay.
The prosecutor argued that given Dahmer's history, he should be sentenced to 5 or 6 years behind bars. She thought Dahmer's life painted a deeply disturbing picture. She said he was very likely to reoffend given his history and that treatment was not going to work on him.
Well, I think that's definitely... See, that's two very different points of view about Dahmer there.
She said, quote, Dahmer had no insight into his problems because Jeffrey had seemed to blame the boy's age for the circumstances rather than his own behavior. That if he wasn't 14, I wouldn't be where I am, in trouble. And it's no, you wouldn't be in trouble if you hadn't drugged a child,
Yeah,
and did what you did with him.
Exactly.
So
that's what's causing the problem, Jeffrey. It's not because the boy, even though you likely knew how old he was. Let's be honest. That's not the problem. That's not the biggest problem here. The biggest problem is you drugged him.
The prosecutor.
I'm gonna get prosecuted.
I'll prosecute you. The prosecutor said Jeffrey had clearly shown a pattern of acting out in front of children. Professionals agreed that Dahmer showed a lot of anger, resistance, and evasiveness, with one diagnosing him as a, quote, schizoid personality disorder, and others saying that he had a lot of problems involving his sexuality. But these were also doctors who were looking at Dahmer as a possible pedophile and not a serial killer, because they had no clue he had already brutally murdered several men.
Right.
So I feel like that's interesting. That perspective, because they're not looking at him. They don't know that part of him. They only know that he's exposed himself on several occasions to children.
Right. They think they have some kind of, I don't know, some kind of a creep with some weird fetishes or sexual compulsions or something like that.
Dahmer's attorney argued that he was a sick man who had not undergone any kind of treatment for his alcohol or psychological problems, offering that Dahmer was a hard worker who was not a multiple offender. And that's only because they kept dropping the charges against him. I mean,
Yeah.
he is a fucking multiple offender.
Big time.
Court-ordered probation and treatment were much more suited to his client's needs than incarceration, he argued. Dahmer's attorney, Gerald Boyle, had only 2 years earlier prosecuted Milwaukee's, the county's first serial killer case of a guy named Michael Harrington. In his statements to the court, Dahmer said, quote, "I have had in the past relationships with men, but not recently. This enticing a child was the climax of my idiocy. It's just going to destroy me. I'm afraid this one incident, I don't know what in the world I was thinking when I did it. I know I was under the influence." So Dahmer blamed his alcoholism for the crime. He went on to tell the judge this arrest was the jolt that he needed to understand how important it was to maintain his freedom. So with a statement like that, Dylan, it lets me know that Dahmer isn't thinking about, I have to stop committing crimes. He's thinking of how important his freedom is. Therefore, he needs to be better at committing crimes so he doesn't get caught.
Yes.
And he made a mistake because he let this young boy go.
Yeah, he's not. There's no way that Dahmer is taking a hard look at himself and that he better stop doing any of the bad shit he's doing because he always blames something else.
Well, at this point, all he's doing, all this situation is doing is reinforcing that he can't let anyone go.
Yes.
That from now on, he has to kill them or he'll end up in jail, right?
Yep, or don't try to kill them in the first place.
Well, Jeffrey's not going to do
It's
that.
another a path you can take.
Okay, well, we're talking about Dahmer here, okay?
He just wants to drink some beers and take some photos.
At the end of the day, the judge opted to send Jeffrey back into the community. He stayed a sentence of 5 years and put him on probation instead. Jeffrey was ordered to serve 1 year in the Milwaukee House of Corrections under work release so he could continue his employment. Instead of going to prison, he would go to a correctional center with a dorm-style setting. In the end, he would only serve 10 months in jail with work release privileges, and he would report to no probation officer.
So this is unsupervised probation.
He was to have no contact with anyone under the age of 18. Jeffrey also needed counseling and alcohol treatment. That was all.
Man, I've gotten worse. I've got more intense probation from having like a half quarter of weed on me. You know? This doesn't make any sense to me. This guy drugged a 14-year-old. Or they suspect he likely drugged a 14-year-old. That's very scary and dangerous.
Yes.
How does he keep getting these light sentences like this? Or just cut back loose with very little consequences for his actions?
No member of the victim's family had been informed of the court appearance or had been asked to speak, like to give an impact statement.
Okay.
In the aftermath, everybody agreed that Dahmer should have been more closely monitored.
Okay, yeah.
Beginning May 23rd, Jeffrey had a new home at the Community Correctional Center, which was about 5 blocks from the chocolate factory. See, this is the thing in my research, Dylan. I did not know that he was like on this very loose type of probation or that he actually spent some time in, this sort of fake jail.
No, I did not know that he was, though it's unsupervised probation, on probation for this other offense. I did not know that. The whole time, he's continuing to kill and dismember and all the crazy shit he's doing.
Well, he's not doing that while he's in jail.
No, not while he's in jail, but...
Well, during the Thanksgiving holiday, Jeffrey was granted a 2-day pass, but failed to report back at curfew. And when he did return, he was drunk. So this was a big no-no. He had skipped the family gathering at Catherine's house. Jeffrey had lost 2 days of good time toward his early release. About 2 weeks after this incident, Jeffrey wrote the judge asking for the early release. Lionel, however, had written the judge to request that Jeffrey not be given early release because there were no available alcohol treatment programs. And he was very concerned that his son would relapse into alcoholism. Because at the end of the day, like Lionel, Catherine, Sherry, the whole family desperately want to believe that Jeffrey's behavior can be blamed on alcohol abuse and not just because Jeffrey's a fucking creep.
Right. If we can just get him to stop drinking, these other things will stop happening.
Yes.
Right. He'll be a better
He
person.
will stop exposing himself to young boys, molesting young boys, if we can just get him sober.
It's the spirits making him do it. It's not that he's a piece of shit.
Sherry Dahmer would later speculate that something had happened to Jeffrey while he was in prison, or not. I mean, it's not really prison, but you know what I'm saying. At this correctional facility. She said he had no light in his eyes and seemed to have lost his soul in there. Like, even, he came out even more, like, isolated and weird than when he had gone in. He said he'd never go back to prison, and something had happened in there, but he would never talk about it.
Okay, so it feels like maybe he was sexually assaulted or something
That seems
like
to be
that?
what Sherry thinks.
Right.
And that it possibly could have been like a gang, like multiple people had assaulted him kind of thing. On March 2nd of 1990, Jeffrey was granted early release from his sentence. Why?
Well, he's a perfect candidate because he never follows the rules and he never takes responsibility for his actions.
Exactly.
So we're going to let this guy out early.
Jeffrey was allowed once again to move into his grandmother's house under the condition he would quickly find his own place. So this time, Catherine's not playing around with him. She expects this to really be a jumping point into his own apartment.
So it's kind of like when you got back from the Navy and your mom was like, so what are you going to do?
Yes.
Like the next day?
Yes.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah. Dahmer's probation officer, a woman named Donna Chester, she was actually a social worker, but tasked, I guess, through the probation office to be an officer.
Okay.
However that works.
Yeah. It makes total sense.
Right. So she was required to meet with Jeffrey twice a month, but she had about 121 clients. I mean, her caseload was huge, and she often skipped their meetings. When they did meet, Jeffrey was considered a depressive who was hopeless as a productive member of society. Those were some of her notes.
Wait a second. He's a ne'er-do-well, right?
Her objective was to get Dahmer sober and to get him to open up about his sexuality. He told her he had no friends, drank alone, and that's when his problems would arise. In her notes, Donna Chester wrote that Jeffrey, according to Lionel, had been abused as a boy by a neighbor. She wrote notes that maybe this was why Jeffrey had certain sexual desires and issues. But Jeffrey doesn't remember that incident at all and claims it never happened.
Claims he wasn't abused when he was younger?
Yes.
Okay.
And Lionel's the only one that has said he was. So even Joyce, like no other family members have said this is what happened.
Okay, that's a little strange.
Well, I mean, it just makes me wonder if Lionel's trying to
Rationalize?
yes, or justify his son's behavior.
Yeah. Like this one time I thought something might have happened. Maybe it must have happened because that's why it's making him act like this as an
Yes.
adult. Yeah, I think there might be a possibility that's the case there.
Although Jeffrey was making about $300 per week, which by today's spending power would be like $664.
So he's making good money.
Yeah.
Decent money.
He had difficulty finding a place to live. He was terrible with money management and often expected that he would be bailed out by his father or grandmother. It was on May 14th of 1990 that Jeffrey found an apartment at 924 North 25th Street, apartment number 213. These were called the Oxford Apartments. This is the infamous apartment building, Dylan.
Oh my God. I can remember the exterior of this apartment building in my young child's mind as the story was breaking.
No one knows exactly why Jeffrey chose this particular apartment or neighborhood. It was an area of low income, residents mostly, and incredibly high crime, which did keep police busy at all hours. It didn't seem to be a matter of mere financials, but also the fact that Jeffrey could operate here unnoticed.
That's exactly why he wants to live here in a neighborhood like this. It's perfect for him.
Donna Chester, his probation officer, was exempt from visiting her client's apartment because the neighborhood was deemed too dangerous. Although Jeffrey was the worst danger in the whole area.
Yeah.
He is the danger. Jeffrey often missed his appointments using excuses like he overslept or was sick. His social worker did little to report it to her higher-ups and just let him slide.
He's doing whatever he wants. He doesn't have to follow the rules. I mean, it's just the same story over and over for him.
Yes, it seems at every turn he has little to no supervision and no repercussions for his actions.
People, this is what your kids can turn into if you coddle them. So kick that kid off your lap right now. Make them figure their shit out at like an early age, or like around 5 or 6. Get some direction in their life and have them be productive citizens, okay?
In June, he told Donna Chester he was attracted to men, but felt guilty about it. She recommended he contact a gay rights organization to talk about his feelings.
It's okay.
Yeah, this lady is super helpful.
Why didn't I think of that?
It was about a month after he moved into the apartment that he met 28-year-old Eddie Smith at the Phoenix bar. He offered him money to pose for photographs and have sex. The two took a cab to Dahmer's apartment where they engaged in oral sex. Smith passed out after consuming a drugged drink, and that's when Dahmer strangled the man, then dismembered his body. Dahmer snapped 4 to 5 photos during the dismemberment process. He disposed of Smith in trash bags, which Dahmer left behind the building. He also tossed the Polaroids out. Smith was known to wear a head wrap, which earned him the nickname the Sheik. His sister Carolyn had last seen him on June 14th of 1990, just before the Gay Pride Parade. He had been dancing at gay bars on this evening, and about a week later, she was the one who reported him missing. It was a year later that a white man phoned her to say she needed to stop looking for Smith because he was dead, and he knew this because he had been the one to kill him.
Oh my God.
This anonymous caller.
You think that was Jeffrey?
No, it totally was Jeffrey.
What the hell?
Because he would later admit that he had actually made this phone call.
No shit.
Yes.
So he knows that the guy's sister's still looking for him actively in the area, and he tells her to just quit.
Yes.
He's dead because I killed him.
Exactly.
Oh my God, that's evil. That's pretty evil.
Yeah. And no one really knows why he made this call. Was it out of guilt or because he is just sadistic monster who wants to torture this poor woman?
Or maybe he felt like he could exert control or something.
It was a few weeks later, in July of 1990, that Ricky Lee Beeks, who also went by the alias Raymond Lamont Smith, was at Club 219. Beeks was offered money to go home with Dahmer, where they could have drinks, watch videos, take some photos. Beeks was 33 years old, and he did have a history of being a sex worker. Beeks had a daughter in Rockford, Illinois, and he had told his sister he was going to visit the girl. But he had this history of kind of disappearing Dylan for periods of time with no contact with family. So when they didn't hear from him, it wasn't entirely unusual. But at the time of his disappearance, he had been living with his sister. Her name is Donna Grace. Beeks had a lengthy criminal history for first-degree sexual assault, disorderly conduct, criminal damage to property, theft, and trespassing. In the wake of his disappearance, his sister had heard rumors that perhaps he'd been shot. But by the time Meeks fell victim to Dahmer, the serial killer had become adept at cutting up bodies. And this would make Meeks Dahmer's 7th victim.
Oh my God.
But again, he had a criminal history. So when he's missing, of course, police don't really want to take it that seriously.
No. Once again, ignoring an entire community because they don't understand the community and they're not comfortable having interactions with them.
A 15-year-old boy was assaulted by Dahmer on July 8th of 1990, but was unable to give police enough details to ID an assailant. The boy lived with a foster mother who did not speak English at all. See, I did not know this incident either.
Well, no, there's a lot. You've given me all kinds of little tidbits.
The boy was standing out in front of the Phoenix bar that July day when he was offered $200 to pose nude for photographs. Dahmer offered the teenager a drink, but the boy refused to take this drink. When he was lying flat on Dahmer's bed posing for photos, Dahmer did offer the boy a drink, but he refused to take it. And again, Dahmer has that Exorcist 3 DVD, or I'm sorry, VHS playing that tape.
Yeah.
He's obsessed with the Exorcist 3.
It's very, very weird.
Yeah. So while all of this is happening, the boy's posing, Dahmer's taking photos, he suddenly feels a crushing blow of a rubber mallet to the back of his head, while Dahmer then jumps on the boy and tries to strangle him. But the boy was able to convince Dahmer to let him go, and Dahmer even called a taxi for the child.
Oh, my God.
When the boy arrived home, he told his foster mother he had been assaulted, but didn't give her specifics because he was not openly gay and didn't want to let her know that he'd been...
So he just told her something happened.
Yeah, but the next day, she took him to the hospital for treatment because he had some serious bruising. A social worker was contacted and then police, but after one visit, law enforcement never followed up. All the boy could remember was the perpetrator's first name was Jeffrey. Again, if there was any kind of follow-up to this, you would know the name Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah.
You would know the neighborhood. I mean, all they have to do is ask around at Club 219 or the Phoenix bar where this happened. They would know who Jeffrey was.
Look in your records and see if anyone's gotten in trouble for assaulting people that might live in the area.
They just dropped the ball repeatedly.
I mean, at this point, he's been in kind of like a halfway house situation almost. And he's been sentenced, and he's been, keeps getting a second chance on everything. He's been on probation. I mean, I don't know. At what point do cops connect the dots?
Well, once again, Dahmer was able to slip away unscathed. Jeffrey reported to his social worker, Chester, the very next day. He tried selling his camera to some of the other probation officers, saying he had some serious financial problems. Donna Chester couldn't figure out how he was blowing through $300 a week with little to show for it. She gave him some information on food pantries and free meal sites. During the meeting, Dahmer frequently talked about suicide. Chester noted that he seemed too depressed and bombarded with other problems to be thinking about sex.
Okay.
2 months after attacking this teenager, Dahmer met 24-year-old Ernest Miller in front of an adult bookstore in a gritty central neighborhood in Milwaukee. Miller had graduated from Milwaukee High School of the Arts, the West Division, and was known as a very talented dancer. He also grew up singing in church and was known for having a really remarkable voice. Very talented young man, according to friends and family. And he had hoped that his dancing would lead to professional opportunities. Miller was in town visiting his aunt for the weekend, and that's when he took off walking downtown to this bookstore. When Miller encountered the polite, sandy-haired man at the bookstore, Dahmer offered him money to return to the stranger's apartment. Now, Miller was posed and photographed. Then Dahmer and Miller engaged in consensual sex. Miller had been given coffee, which had rum in it and was also laced with sedatives. When he was finally passed out, Dahmer cut his throat with a large hunting knife. The body was then placed in the bathtub, and the knife was used to dismember him. He threw the filleted skin into trash bags, but kept Miller's skull, which he painted and put with the others.
My God.
He also bleached Miller's skeleton, took a photo of it hanging in the shower, which he did keep. He placed Miller's biceps in the freezer. During his interview later with law enforcement, Dahmer confessed that Miller's biceps were cannibalized. But when further pressed about the cannibalism, Dahmer became irritated and refused to discuss it anymore. Yeah, it's a lot.
Do you think even the cannibalism was like too much for Jeffrey?
Maybe.
To even face it.
Like maybe
and
that's
talk
what he was
about?
kind of embarrassed about or something.
Yeah. Okay.
That's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, that's pretty hardcore. Well, the whole thing. I mean, you just
Yes.
you hunt these guys, you lure them in, and then you spring your trap, and you just instantly kill them, and then have sex with their dead body, and then cut them up,
There's so many like
and then
what the fuck moments
you take certain
in
parts,
Jeffrey's
yeah,
ritual,
and put it in the freezer,
his killing ritual.
and you eat it later. There's a lot to Jeffrey Dahmer.
It's very invested
It was
in this.
possibly
right?
the most sensational case of my youth.
100%.
As far because we grew up hearing about the other, Bundy, Gacy, all that, and I will say for us in our age group,
Dahmer was probably the first really big televised case because we watched it unfold
yes,
on the nightly news, Hard Copy, the sensational show that used to come on in the afternoons, was all over this.
I'm 44, you're 42.
Yes.
So for our age group, it was Dahmer and BTK. That was our killers for our generation.
And OJ.
I don't.
I'm just saying, as far as like super televised.
No,
in
and
our
OJ
face.
certainly has a place in history of launching.
But as far as serial killers go, no, Dahmer was like the big one for
and
our
BTK,
generation.
it was unfolded in front of us as well.
Yeah, and Gary Ridgway.
And Gary Ridgway.
Those are some of the big names.
Oh
Now, Miller's family had only skeletal remains left at the coroner's office. I mean, here we've got Dylan, another vibrant life snuffed out by a monster.
Yeah, I know. Who could have been stopped?
The murder rituals played out very similarly in most cases, but a few had a twist. In September of 1990, Dahmer met 22-year-old David Thomas at the C'est La Vie gay bar. He offered the young man money to return to the apartment. Thomas had been living on and off with a girlfriend, and together they had a 3-year-old daughter. His family hadn't heard from him in over a month at the time of his disappearance. Yet Dahmer didn't have sex with Thomas. Instead, the pair chatted, but Dahmer did make him a laced drink. He drugged and killed Thomas, but would later say he didn't want to have sex with Thomas. He wasn't attracted to him. But he did think that Thomas would be angry after being drugged.
Don't drug him. It's not hard.
So he felt like he had to do something.
Yeah, I know. It's
because
always,
he didn't want this guy to be angry at him.
He always has a reason, a rationalization, or something to explain the cause and effect.
Now, since Thomas was not his type sexually, after he killed him, he said he didn't keep any of the body parts, though he did photograph the dismemberment process.
Okay, so now here we have an instance where he's got to go through his ritual, and his ritual is killing. He can play out like it's a byproduct, but here's an instance where he's not sexually attractive to the guy at all, but he still killed him. I mean, so he's a full-blown psychopathic killer.
David's sister, Leslie, identified her brother through a photograph taken by Dahmer, but it was just of his facial features. Chandra Beanland, the girlfriend, reported him missing on September 24th. Thomas's disappearance was not taken that seriously by police because, again, he had a lengthy criminal record. He had been arrested about 5 times for battery, 16 times for shoplifting, and numerous arrests for obstructing justice and resisting arrest. So, again, law enforcement are like, he's not worthy of our time. Which is very sad.
It's very sad.
And wrong.
Yeah, it
Because
is.
you're there to protect and serve everybody.
Yeah, even if it's something you're not comfortable with or don't like being around or whatever, you need to do your fucking job.
Police records show the day Thomas was reported missing, Dahmer was also a victim, Dylan, of an armed robbery. Near North 27th Street and Wisconsin Avenue West, Dahmer had been approached by 2 black males close to the area where Miller had been picked up only a few months earlier. Around 8:20 p.m., the men approached Dahmer asking him for money, and then they threatened to shoot him when he refused to give them any. The suspects took $10 from him, and they robbed him of a bus pass. And this was actually the 3rd time he had been mugged.
Really?
Since moving into this neighborhood.
So it's not... We know he's living there for a reason, his own fucked up reasons, but it's not working out for him, is it?
Between September of 1990 and February 1991, Dahmer was reportedly chronically depressed. Though he attended mental health and alcohol treatment programs, it didn't seem to be helping at all. According to Donna Chester, Dahmer's attitude remained negative, and he was very much resentful of people who made more money than he did. And he would often ask her, like, why are they so lucky? And had this real chip on his shoulder. And it's like, because they've actually tried, and you've done nothing in your fucking life but be a drunk and fuck up. Right?
Well, he doesn't.
He's pissed away all of his opportunities.
Yeah, but he doesn't view it like that. It's something else's fault. It's not Jeffrey. It's not Jeffrey's actions and choices. He'll never view it like that.
No, not at all. In November, his grandmother phoned him at the chocolate factory to see how he was doing. Dahmer recalled it with affection and said it was one of the few times he actually felt like somebody cared about him. It wasn't that Dahmer didn't like people and preferred isolation. It was that he couldn't handle rejection. Doing things his way, he felt like he could never be left behind. By the holidays, around the end of 1990, Dahmer admitted to his social worker that he had not heard from his mother in over 5 years. She encouraged him to send Joyce a Christmas card. He was uncomfortable about seeing his family, feeling that he always let them down. He felt Lionel was controlling and that his brother David, who attended college, had nothing in common with him. He did say he felt like they were supportive of him, though. But by February of 1991, Dahmer could no longer resist these desires he was having. So it seems like when he was having a bout of depression, he refrained.
Yeah.
But then he just had to get back to it. He met an 18-year-old named Christopher Strouder, who was waiting for a bus near Marquette University. Strouder lived with his grandmother and had recently lost a job as a nursing assistant. He had planned to get into modeling. Strouder was a high school dropout who had joined the Gay Youth Milwaukee organization when he was just 15. So he was very out and proud, right? In 1987, at age 14, he'd been arrested for 2 counts of second-degree sexual assault, so he did have a juvenile record. Strouder was allegedly lured to Dahmer's apartment on the pretense of money in exchange for modeling. And since he wanted to be a model, he thought this was a good opportunity.
This could be my big break.
To get some photos.
Jeffrey's like, just more face, more lips. Look at me. Get the fan blowing in your hair. It'd be taking direction, photographic direction from Dahmer would be weird, right?
The fan photos look pretty cool. I've used the fan myself a few times for models, and it looks pretty neat.
Yeah, now look at me.
Don't make fun.
Now scrunch your lips up. That's nice. Nice.
Okay, done, Dylan.
Just like that.
You're done. Once arriving at Dahmer's apartment, Strouder was drugged, restrained, and murdered, as you know. Dahmer then dismembered his body while capturing each step on camera. Once he photographed his victim's body, Dahmer kept the Polaroid pictures in his bedside table as a creepy memento.
Yeah, you could look through them and probably masturbate or some crazy shit like that.
And Strouder was Dahmer's 10th victim. He's just piling them up. And the whole time he's on fucking probation.
Yeah.
And if his probation officer had ever once stepped foot in his apartment, think of the lives that could have been saved.
I'm saying it's the entire system, not just police, has failed us here. Failed the entire community.
Later, his friends will be puzzled when they learn that he became a victim of Jeffrey Dahmer because they said Strouder had openly not liked white men and would often talk about he would never be with a white man and that he never trusted white men. So they just were really confused. Like, how did Dahmer lure this guy away? But so many of the victims' families have said this. Like, my loved one was street smart. He wasn't a fool. He knew better. He's not the kind of guy that's just going to go hang out with a stranger. I think it speaks volumes as to how, like,
Dahmer operated.
Unassuming he was.
Yes.
Polite.
Disarming.
And manipulative. Yeah,
I think just that, what you've kind of made fun about, how boring and goobery he really is, that comes across. He kind of exudes that. And I think that would make him non-threatening to people.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's not a big guy.
No.
Right?
Right.
So they're like, oh, well, he's physically not that, he's not that imposing.
And just
he's
his
quiet, polite. He's such a, dork.
Yeah. I'll just get this $50.
They just think, yeah,
I'll
they're
get
not
this
worried
50
about
bucks
this
right
guy.
quick. And this guy, I'm not scared of this guy.
Around the time that Strader was murdered, Dahmer had taken vacation time off from the chocolate factory. Now, he told his social worker, Donna Chester, that the time was being used to straighten out his life, including his finances, that he was going to really try to get it together. But only 2 weeks later, Dahmer complained to her that he was broke and having to walk 16 blocks to work because he couldn't afford a bus pass.
Okay. He's a loser. That's how a loser lives.
And she noted that he was looking unkempt once again, having dirty hair, greasy hair, hadn't shaved, hadn't showered, seemed like he was wearing dirty clothes, which when he would have these sort of depressive episodes or, these go into this depressive state for weeks at a time, he was definitely neglecting his appearance. She encouraged him to acknowledge his sexuality, telling him that she felt like that would help him, kind of snap out of the depression, and that she was worried he would reoffend because he was not addressing his sexual issues.
Yeah, I mean, she's trying to do what she thinks right to a degree, but she's not very, like you said, one time, even if she had to get escorted over there by a uniformed officer, go by his apartment.
I agree.
Step into his world and see what he's doing, because that tells you a lot about.
I also think it tells us a lot about the system that they're willing to put a woman in this position who's a social worker.
Yeah.
She's not like a trained law enforcement person to be.
She's not a probation officer.
She's not a probation officer. She's not trained to see the kinds of red flags that like a law enforcement officer might recognize in Dahmer.
Right.
She's got a huge caseload. She's incredibly overwhelmed, like overworked, underpaid kind of thing. And she is doing the best she can, but what she's trying to approach is she's kind of from the, here's some resources, like what a social worker would do. Like, here are resources. I mean, she's not a psychologist. She's not capable of diagnosing him, treating him for depression. So again, it's like, what is the state doing employing this person as a probation officer? Because she's not really trained to do this job.
No, and not only is she's probably missing things with Dahmer, probably with countless other of her clients in her caseload, because it's way too much. No one could do that or do a good job with that many.
But see, I had no idea that he was being monitored.
Right.
Which, loosely using the word monitored, but you know what I'm saying.
Right.
By March, Joyce had finally contacted her son because, remember, he had mailed her the Christmas card. Dahmer would later say that his mother accepted his homosexuality and had promised to keep in touch. So I'm not sure at this time if he openly admitted to his mother he was gay, or if she said, I know you're gay, but I still love you. I'm not sure. But it seems during this conversation, they were able to reconcile his sexuality.
Okay.
19-year-old Errol Lindsay lived with his mother, Mildred, and was considered a very devoted son. He had gone out on April 7th, 1991, to get a key made. Lindsay bumped into Dahmer at the key shop, which was about 2 blocks from the Oxford apartments, and Lindsay agreed to return there after being offered money. Dahmer gave him a drink, and that's when Lindsay passed out. Jeffrey strangled him, then performed oral sex on the corpse. He dismembered Lindsay, keeping the skull, which he painted. This gentleman, Mr. Lindsay, would later be identified through dental records because that's all they had left of him.
Jesus.
Though Lindsay had a criminal history, he was known as artistic and loving, especially where his mother was concerned. He was definitely like a mama's boy. Kept in touch with his mama, saw her every day. Again, not the kind of situation where this guy's going to disappear and never be heard from again.
Right.
and he had just gone out to get a key made.
Yeah.
So they're expecting him home any minute. Lindsay's cousin, Keely Favors Watkins, would later say to reporters, quote, Jeffrey Dahmer was not allowed to do anything that the police and the judicial system did not allow him to do.
There you go. It can't be summed up any better.
Jeffrey continued to suffer from financial problems, which he discussed often with Donna Chester. She listed him as a compulsive buyer who could not manage money. Where was his money going? Was it going just to drinks, or was he going because he's paying these guys? I mean, what's happening with his money?
Well, I think for every time that he lures somebody, Jeffrey's probably got multiple times that didn't work. He didn't get them all the way back to his apartment. And he's going to do that by plying them with drinks, paying, trying to throw his money around, look like he's kind of a baller, so he can entice these people back to his room. So I think for every time it worked, you probably got 5 other times it didn't work. That's a lot of drinks, out drinking, you know.
It's true.
I mean, you could really burn the money up if you're in the bars multiple times a week.
Police showed up at Dahmer's door on May 4th of 1991 after a 26-year-old man named Dean Vaughn was discovered strangled to death in an upstairs apartment at the Oxford building. Jeffrey told detectives he had not seen or heard anything peculiar. Vaughn's murder remains unsolved, but some speculate it was the handiwork of Dahmer, that he maybe murdered this neighbor and just didn't have a chance to complete the process. But again, we've got police at his door questioning him.
How could you not suspect Dahmer? That's his MO.
And there's stank shit coming from his apartment. This odor. But again, we're just going to not do anything about it.
That's my gay boyfriend's butthole that smells like that. You guys want to come in and look? And they're like, no, Jeff, no, thanks. What the dude? No, you've already had
I'm going to offer police to look at your butthole next time.
Yeah, they can search my butthole. There's nothing, I have nothing to hide, okay? But, so you have had, you're in a, how should I say this? A unique position to give us insight into the smell of decomposing human flesh, okay? It
is a very specific odor.
It is something
you are going to know.
It's going to catch your...
That it's like nothing else.
That's the thing. That's what I'm getting at. It is a smell. You're going to know, even if you can't place it, you don't know what it is, you're going to know that's not trash. That's not old chicken. That's not beans on the stove. That is something horrible.
I'm glad you pointed out beans on the stove, because nothing goes sideways faster than pinto beans.
Beans.
If you leave them for more than a few hours,
them son of a bitches,
they stank to high heaven. That is the stinkiest smell besides a dead body.
Beans go fastest. Chicken's a close second. But beans will, if you forget some beans over there, you have a rude awakening coming.
Yes. If you leave beans in the crock pot for a few days,
you might just contemplate throwing it away.
Yes. That scent... It'll make you feel some type of way. Okay?
So yeah,
and
we all know about the not notoriously, but the neighbor who had a problem with Jeffrey, didn't like him, thought he was a creep, and called and seen these young guys going in and out all the fucking time, seeing them in different states of half drugged. So he did, she was not a Jeffrey fan. And she's raising hell this entire time about while he's living there, right?
That the apartment smells funny.
Yeah, that the apartment smells funny. Something's weird. Something ain't right. Yeah.
On the 24th of May, 1991, 31-year-old deaf man Tony Hughes went to Club 219. Now, he no longer resided in Milwaukee after a neighbor was killed there, and he had moved to Madison, Wisconsin. But he just so happened to be in town visiting his sister at the time of his disappearance. Hughes enjoyed going to this dance club because he could feel the reverberations of the music and really liked to go to dance clubs because of this.
Wow.
And he had actually met Dahmer before, back in 1989. Dahmer wrote him a note offering $50 for photographs, and Hughes agreed. Now, at the apartment, it was, of course, the ritual for Jeffrey to give his guest a special drink.
You know, I'm just waiting for him to run across the guy who's properly hydrated and not thirsty at the moment.
Jeffrey murdered the man, then dismembered him, and he kept this guy's skull, Hughes's skull, but he left it unpainted. Hughes's family immediately grew concerned when he did not return home from his evening out, and they went to Club 219 and talked to patrons there. They organized candlelight vigil. They had a missing persons flyer printed up, which they papered the city with. Shirley Hughes, Tony's mother, was a deeply religious woman who taught Bible classes at her church. She attended Dahmer's court appearances later, not because she was angry, but because she said she just wanted to see the man who had hurt her son.
Oh my God.
As you can imagine, the foul odors, as we mentioned, Dylan, emitting from Dahmer's apartment were causing concerns for neighbors. Dahmer himself admitted the body parts smelled pretty horrible, but that no one ever did anything about it, so he just kept the routine going. He's like, well, nobody ever went through my trash or told me not to throw.
No one stopped me.
Yes.
He kills me with this shit.
I know, right?
I mean, it's just, it's in every aspect of his life. Well, this is the reason I think this happened or, blah, blah. It's never, I should have stopped killing people.
It was May 26th of 1991 when Dahmer met 14-year-old Conrad Symphophone. And you may recognize that last name because Conrad's older brother had also been a victim of Dahmer's.
I was going to say that was the name you fucked up earlier
but
in the episode.
he managed to escape.
Okay.
Right? He went to the hospital, and this is how Dahmer ended up with a sex charge. Now, he meets this young boy at the Grand Avenue Mall in downtown Milwaukee. The teenager already had a history of prostitution on his juvenile record. Dahmer offered the boy money to pose in bikini briefs for photographs. Conrad was given a drugged beverage, which he consumed. Once he passed out, Dahmer had oral sex with him. Running out of beer, Dahmer left the apartment to head out to the bar to buy some more beer. And it was during this time that Conrad kind of revived himself and fled the apartment. Glenda Cleveland, Dahmer's neighbor that you were mentioning earlier, Dylan, along with her teenage daughter, Sandra Smith, they see this half-naked, teenage boy fleeing from the apartment. They are concerned, and they call 911 around 2 a.m. Squad 36, which consisted of 2 officers, were dispatched to the location. When the officers arrived, they found the naked male, and they wrapped him in a blanket. He had a scuffed knee, likely from running up the alley where officers had found him, but there was some speculation he was bleeding because Dahmer had injured him, but it was just from a scuffed knee. Smith and her cousin, who was also a witness to this, were yelling at officers to help the boy, and that's when Dahmer sort of appeared out of nowhere, having returned from the store. Dahmer tells the police officers that the boy is a house guest who had had just a little too much to drink and had began, acting erratically. So Dahmer's like, I got to get him under control. Dahmer produced an ID while Conrad was incoherent. The police chalked it up to a domestic situation, and they sent the boy back upstairs with Jeffrey. The police even escorted him and saw the boy's clothes neatly draped over the arm of the couch, which further led them to believe that this had just been a domestic quarrel.
Right. Oh, my God. How sad is that?
Hidden from view in the bedroom was the 3-day-old corpse of Tony Hughes laid out on the bed. One of the officers said there was a stench, but that it was more like someone had taken a dump. He also commented it was not illegal for someone to defecate inside their own apartment, so there was no reason to perform a search.
Oh, my God.
Dahmer also showed the officers photographs of the young man in his underwear, which proved that they had known each other. So again, kind of reinforcing the fact that, we're a couple to police.
Yup, and that's all he's got to do for them to be literally trying to get out the door.
After police left, Dahmer strangled the boy and had sex with his corpse. He took more photographs, dismembered him, and then kept his unpainted skull along with his others in this collection. The boy would have to later be identified using dental records. After this call, the two officers made jokes on the radio about delousing themselves.
Well, that shows you their mindset and what they were thinking the whole time.
The officers had responded to a total of 14 calls during their shift, including domestic violence complaints, gunshots, and men with guns. Once they were ending the shift, Glenda Cleveland called the station to follow up on what had just happened with this teenage boy. When transcripts from Cleveland's calls were released, it painted an unflattering picture of these police officers. She pleaded with one of the officers named Balsarac to listen to her about Conorac's age. She was like, "It's obvious he's very young. He doesn't look like an adult. Are you sure he's an adult?" But the officer explained all the information they collected at the scene seemed to indicate that this was an adult man. She called back 2 days later after seeing a newspaper report about a missing boy, this Laotian boy.
This is literally the boy, guys.
She believed it was the same boy she had seen with Dahmer 2 nights earlier. She had asked officers to return and take the 3 women's statements in order to help with this missing persons case.
Yeah.
Now, the Simone family, they had actually fled from Laos in 1979 and headed to Wisconsin. I'll get that out. He had 7 siblings and the parents. So you've got this huge family fleeing to the U.S.
Right.
You know, English is their second language. They were not a well-to-do family. They're just trying to, make it happen, make ends meet. The Laotian community was later outraged, saying that if it had been a white boy, police would have done a better job to get him help that night. Some officers said they would have sent an incoherent person to the hospital for detoxification. That would have been more of like the protocol.
And I don't know. Would the cops? Does skin color have anything to do with it? I know they were obviously reacting badly to them being gay or around gay communities. So yeah, I'm sure that probably didn't help any.
Well, Dylan, I always like to be devil's advocate, and I did research kind of both sides of the story, and I see where both sides are coming from. You've got the gay community and activists saying that the police didn't want to deal with gay issues at all, that homophobia was rampant, according to activists in this Milwaukee Police Department.
Right.
But to play devil's advocate here, Dylan, the officers didn't have any way of knowing the boy's age. Multiple witnesses would later tell the attorney general, because these officers had internal affairs like all up in their ass. They were investigated. They were tried in the court of public opinion.
Right.
Eventually let go from their position over this, though no charges were filed against them. So multiple witnesses would tell the attorney general that Conorac appeared to be anywhere from 17 to 20 years old. Later, the officers, as I mentioned, they're going to be investigated for wrongdoing. No charges will be brought. And they kept showing a photo of this boy from when he was much younger. So it seemed to paint this picture of he looked very young.
But he did.
But most people were like, that was an old picture, and he definitely looked like he could be an adult. So others are defending the officers like they really didn't have any way of knowing. And they're presented with here's his clothes, here's a picture of him in his underwear.
Yeah,
We're a couple. That's
kind of compelling if you didn't, you know what I mean?
Right. But at the end of the day, let's be honest, they've got this incoherent person. They should have taken him to the hospital.
Right. Yeah. Hey, we're going to get the paramedics over here to check him out and anything besides lead him back upstairs.
Exactly. After the incident with police, Dahmer continued his out-of-control course. He met with Donna Chester as scheduled, but nothing in her notes painted the picture of a serial killer. Dahmer had admitted that he was going to his alcohol treatment program regularly. He was cooperative. He denied having any kind of sexual activity. Again, she's encouraging him that he really needs to confront his sexual feelings.
Just come out of the closet, Jeff.
So that he wouldn't reoffend. It was June 30th when Dahmer traveled to Chicago to attend the Pride Parade. Chicago offered him anonymity and a new hunting ground where he could move through the gay bars without being recognized. Because in Chicago, there were 76 gay bars and only 8 in Milwaukee. And we all know he had quite a reputation in Milwaukee at these gay bars.
I'm sure there's
The
people
bathhouses.
that thought he was a creep.
Well, yeah.
I guarantee
and
it.
Rumor, remember word and rumor went around that he was drugging people.
Right.
Dahmer met Matt Turner, a 20-year-old who was known also as Donald Montrell. Had an alias.
What a great alias.
Born in Flint, Michigan, Turner was described as a well-spoken young man who had a sharp mind. He had fled his home for Chicago. The runaway had dreams of becoming a model, like some of Dahmer's other victims. So again, you've got these aspiring models. When you offer them photo shoots, of course they're going to jump on the opportunity.
Well, yeah, it's a chance to make a few bucks, maybe further their career.
Dahmer welcomed the young man into his apartment after luring him back to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They rode the bus back together. Once they're at his apartment, Dahmer murdered the young man. And he'd only run away from a Chicago halfway house about a year earlier. So he left home, was in a halfway house, had run away from the halfway house. Again, it's creating the situation where you don't have a lot of contact with family.
Yep.
It's harder to track you down.
It's true.
Police aren't going to take it very seriously because this is a person with a history of disappearing, a history of running away. It just really complicates things. But Dahmer drugs him, strangles him, and then, of course, dismembers Turner. His body was saved in Dahmer's freezer, certain body parts. His torso was placed in the freezer first, along with his head and some of his organs. A 57-gallon barrel was purchased by Dahmer on July 12th to preserve his body in some acid. It was only about a week after killing Turner that Dahmer went back to Chicago to a bar called Carol's Speakeasy. 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger, a native of Puerto Rico, was a regular at this dance club. Dahmer offered Weinberger money to follow him to Milwaukee, where they could take photos, hang out, watch a movie. You know what movie they're going to watch.
Oh, my God, dude.
The Exorcist 3.
You want me to follow you back to another state? Yeah, that's not weird.
Well, I don't think it was that big of a...
Yeah, it's not that far.
It's not a big ride.
Yeah, I know. But it's still kind of weird.
Whatever. If somebody was like, hey, Dylan, I have free drugs. Do you want to come with me? You would say yes and go, and then you would end up in their freezer.
You think so?
Yeah.
No.
Don't even try to play like you're smarter than you are.
I would not. I would not be like, no, thank you. I have my own drugs, so I don't trust you, Jeff.
That is not true.
I don't trust you,
You
Jeff.
could so be easily victimized.
I could not be victimized. I would be fighting.
I victimize you every day.
I'll allow that to happen. That's my choice.
Unlike the others, Weinberger spent the night with Dahmer and actually woke up the next morning. Alive, breathing.
Wow.
Yeah. They spent 2 days together until finally Weinberger told Dahmer he needed to go home. The news regenerated feelings of abandonment in Jeffrey, who then felt the desire to kill the man. Drugging him, Dahmer strangled the man after he passed out. He took photographs while dismembering the victim, and he put the man's head in the freezer and put the body into this blue barrel, which is now collecting
Multiple victims. My God.
And therefore creating even more stench.
Yeah, because
in the apartment.
Whatever chemical reaction is happening in this barrel, it's definitely going to put off some kind of an odor.
One of Weinberger's friends was with him at the Chicago nightclub on the evening he met Dahmer. Posters were hung up across Chicago's gay clubs, with one even making its way to Milwaukee and was hung in Club 219. But Weinberger wasn't the only person missing, and in the gay community, rumors were rampant about the number of missing men and how police weren't doing anything about it. And then, of course, there's a description of Jeffrey. The friend's like, he left with this blonde guy.
Yeah, this blonde guy with dope-ass glasses.
In the meantime, Dahmer had been missing work, was tardy quite a bit. Staring down the prospect of being fired, Dahmer seemed to sink further into depression, and he was discussing suicide pretty regularly with his caseworker.
Well, he's probably feeling pressure from everything. It's all starting to be too much for him. He can't control it or handle it. Now, instead of completely getting rid of most of the body parts, he's got literal barrels sitting around full of bodies. I mean, just things are not are coming to a head for him.
Oh, just wait. It's getting weirder, Dylan. It was on July 12th that Dahmer met Oliver Lacey, a 22-year-old, and it was near his apartment that he met this guy. Lacey told Dahmer that he was on his way to his cousin's house, and that's when Dahmer offered him money to pose for photographs. Once inside the apartment, the two men disrobed and began giving each other, quote, body rubs. When Lacey fell asleep from his drug drink, Dahmer strangled him and then had anal sex with the body. Dahmer dismembered Lacey, keeping his head in the freezer along with the heart to, quote, eat later.
Jesus.
Lacey had moved to Milwaukee from Chicago. He had a girlfriend and a young son. He worked at a janitorial service, and when he failed to return home from work, his family grew worried. His mother reported him missing on July the 13th. Now, Lacey would actually be the first victim identified once Dahmer's arrested. July 14th of 1991, Jeffrey spent some time with his grandmother, Catherine, who had been hospitalized, and he reported late to work at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory. On this evening, he was fired.
One time too many, Jeff.
After this, he began drinking nonstop. Donna Chester mentioned phoning a union representative at the factory to see if she could help Dahmer get his job back. He hadn't shaved or showered in days. Dahmer had also been given eviction paperwork from the Oxford apartments and was facing homelessness.
Yeah.
Now, did you know that part of the story? Because I did not know that he had been fired or that he was about to be evicted from his apartment, which is not going to work out for him because he's got a 57-gallon barrel of body parts in the living room.
No, but I didn't know that before now, but from the way you were describing everything, it makes sense that he's losing control over everything. It's all coming... You know,
he's just spiraling.
He's spiraling out of control.
He's giving into these desires, this ritual way too much.
Yes.
Yes.
Definitely.
It was July 19th, while waiting on a bus, that Dahmer noticed Joseph Bredehoft. The 25-year-old had a six-pack of beer under his arm, and that's really all it took for Dahmer to be interested.
Hey, do you want to be friends?
Dahmer approached the guy and tried the old photograph for money routine. Bredehoft returned to the apartment where the men had consensual oral sex, according to Jeffrey. Bredehoft was given a sedative in his drink. And once he passed out, Dahmer strangled him, then dismembered his body. He stuffed the body into the barrel, but he did take the time to put the man's head in the freezer.
Gotta keep that head.
Along with several others. Bredehoft was married with 3 children, and he had only come to Milwaukee to stay with his brother for a short time looking for work. Joseph had left for a job interview on the 19th, and that was the last time his brother ever saw him alive. Bredehoft had a history of domestic violence and also a bit of a criminal record.
Oh, wow.
For abusing his wife. In less than 3 weeks, Dahmer had killed 4 men. His life was spinning out of control, and his obsession had just completely taken over everything. To the point, he's not working, he's not showering, he's gonna get evicted.
Yeah, it's all over.
Just total breakdown. July 22nd of 1991, Dahmer was again at the Grand Avenue Mall when he met Tracy Edwards. According to Dahmer, he offered $50 for photographs, but Edwards told people a different story. Edwards said that Dahmer had actually invited a group of people. Edwards is like kind of hanging out with a group of people. And that Dahmer had invited all of them to a party, even saying that his girlfriend was going to be there.
Okay.
So, hey, I'm having a party. Me and my girlfriend, you should come. Edwards said that he had seen Dahmer around the neighborhood in passing. So it wasn't like Dahmer was a complete stranger to him. So he accepted the invitation. And he would later say, Dahmer seemed like a regular guy. Just
That's how
totally
he operates.
Normal,
Yeah.
And invited us to a party. And I thought, well, why not? I'm not doing anything else, right? But he also claims that there was no mention of sex anywhere in this invitation.
Okay.
That it was not come back to my apartment and have sex. It was a party. Dahmer gave a different address to Edward's friends, so they never arrived at the apartment.
That's weird.
The Exorcist 3 was running on the VCR in the bedroom where the two were watching. And that's when Dahmer told Edwards, hey, look over at my tropical fish. Like, hey, look at my fish. I have this aquarium.
Okay.
You should look at my fish. And so as Edwards is like looking at the tropical fish, Dahmer slaps handcuffs on him. Then he pulls a knife on Edwards and sort of sticks him in the chest with it. Dahmer pulls a skull out of a cabinet and begins rubbing it and telling Edwards, you'll stay with me too.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Now, would you freak out?
Yes.
Yeah, that's super scary.
Fortunately, Edwards seized an opportunity to escape by punching Dahmer and kicking him. So he kind of like beats the crap out of Dahmer. He ran out of the building. Edwards spent 5 hours in hell and survived. So after this, he goes to police. There's been some speculation about what really happened inside Dahmer's apartment because Edward's story evolves over time. On television, he described there being numerous locks on the door, but in the photographs and police reports, there were not multiple locks on the door.
Oh, so it's like something you see in a movie where you're trying to get out unlock out the door before the person gets you.
Edwards is giving police interviews after all of this situation blows up, which we're going to get to. And during the interviews, he actually catches the eye of police in Tupelo, Mississippi, who wondered, what's he doing in Milwaukee? Because Edwards was indicted in January of 1990 on charges of raping a 14-year-old girl.
Oh, my God.
While he was free on bond, he fled to Wisconsin. After the Dahmer incident, Edwards was extradited back to Mississippi to stand trial. Now, this is what we know about him. In 2011, Edwards, who was homeless at the time, assisted a second homeless man in throwing a third homeless man off a bridge to his death.
Holy shit.
He served 1.5 years in prison for his role in the crime.
So this is a very interesting situation.
See, I did not know this.
You have put us in.
I'm not saying that this guy like deserved any of this.
Well,
but at
he
the same
sounds
time,
like a piece of shit, though.
I had no idea that this guy was like a child sex offender. So I'm like, at the end of the day, he's really not any better than Dahmer. Let's be honest.
No, he's not.
I mean, and then murdered a homeless man.
Well, and I think people lose sight of that sometimes because these victims of this horrible, horrible things that Jeffrey was doing, sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that the victim is a good person, right? That's not to say that Jeffrey should be the judge, jury, executioner, or in this case, but a lot of times people that's washed over because no one's ever going to dare say anything about the victim, right? But these charges
are serious
charges, and then murder, or just it sounds like throwing someone off a bridge over some dumb argument or something like that. Those are terrible things to do to people, and the rape. So yeah, if he did those things, fuck that guy. I don't give a fuck if you were a victim of Jeffrey Dahmer's or not. I wish he had actually killed you before you killed someone else.
Damn.
I mean, that's horrible. Violate a 14-year-old like that? That's horrible.
Yeah. But this guy, I mean, since he's managed to escape and went to the media, his story changed quite a bit.
But then Jeffrey tells his version.
Details were embellished. I mean, over the course of time, people are kind of like, just point to the fact that we can't 100% trust his version of events.
Right.
Even though he was a victim, this did happen to him. It just went from like, he kept me in his apartment for 5 hours and handcuffed me to
like a movie script.
Like I was locked with 40 locks and,
yeah.
All this other stuff had happened that he never actually said happened in the beginning. So you know how that works. At 11:30 p.m. on July 22nd, Edwards flagged down 2 Milwaukee police officers, Robert Routh and Rolf Mueller, at the corner of North 25th Street. The officers noted Edwards had handcuffs attached to his wrist. He explained to the officers that some freak had placed the handcuffs on him and asked if the police could take them off. When the officer's handcuff keys failed to fit the brand of handcuffs, Edwards agreed to accompany the officers back to the apartment where Edwards said he had spent the last 5 hours before escaping.
Nice.
I mean, if some madman had kept you in his apartment for 5 hours torturing you, would you go back in there with
No.
cops? I'm not going to go back in there. I'm going to tell them you're going to fucking cut this off of me, but I'm not going back in this fucking apartment.
No, but I'll tell you where it's at, but I don't want to go anywhere near it.
Yeah, I'm not going back in there. When the officers and Edwards went into apartment 213, Dahmer allowed the trio inside and acknowledged that he had in fact put handcuffs on Edwards, but he didn't really offer any kind of explanation why he had done this. Now, at this point, Edwards tells the officers that Dahmer had brandished this large knife and that this had all happened in the bedroom. But Dahmer didn't really comment on this bit of information. And he told the officers that he did have the key to the handcuffs inside the bedroom.
Yes.
On, like inside the bedside table.
Yeah, the nightstand.
Yeah.
Yes, inside the nightstand.
Sorry, I've done a lot of talking and...
That's okay.
Yes. As Mueller entered the bedroom, Dahmer attempted to pass him and was like, oh, I'll get the key. And that's when the second officer was like, no, he'll get it. You need to back off.
Ah, finally, a cop's maybe not going to listen to Jeffrey's bullshit.
In the bedroom, Mueller noted there was a large knife under the bed. He saw an open drawer, which, upon closer inspection, contained scores of Polaroid pictures, Dylan, many of which showcased human bodies in various stages of dismemberment.
Oh my God, this is how out of control Jeffrey was to just leave something like that laying around.
Mueller noted that these photos seemed to be taken inside this apartment because of the same decor that was present.
Right.
And that's when Mueller walks into the living room and shows these to his partner and says the words, "These are for real." When Dahmer saw that Mueller was holding several of his pictures, he fought with the officers trying to resist arrest, which I didn't know he tried to resist.
He started struggling because
Yes.
he knew that it was over.
The officers were quickly able to snatch him up, cuff his hands behind his back, and then they called for backup. At this point, Mueller opened the refrigerator, and that's when he saw a freshly severed head of a black male on the bottom shelf.
Jesus.
As Dahmer lay pinned to the floor, Ralph has him pinned down. He turned his head up toward the officer and muttered the words, "For what I did, I should be dead."
You should be, Jeffrey.
The
You were
physical
murdering.
remains of 11 bodies were taken into the county medical examiner. A special team of experts, including forensic pathologists, a forensic dentist, and a forensic anthropologist, had to be called in to help identify the body. So they had to bring in a whole fucking team.
Well, yeah, because they literally have just pieces of bodies here and there in some of the cases.
Oh, yeah. And
Yeah.
Dahmer didn't know the names of the victims. He had never taken the time to find out who they were. So many of them had to be ID'd using photographs.
Jesus, could you imagine?
No. Never in its history had Milwaukee's police department investigated such a horrific serial killer. The Criminal Investigation Bureau was overwhelmed. Following the discovery, about 40 officers were assigned to the case. And just because Dahmer had confessed, it did not mean their investigation was over. They had their work cut out for them because they have to figure out who are all these people.
Yeah, which is, and they have to get over the shock of what's been discovered. I mean, come on.
They were looking at cases, Dylan, from a man named Fresno. A man from Fresno. His name was Patrick Van Zant. He had actually gone missing 2 months after Dahmer was released from that correctional center. And they had found his foot about 4 months before Dahmer was finally caught.
Oh my gosh.
So they're like, is he involved in this death? And then I mentioned before Adam Walsh in Florida, because Dahmer had lived in Florida at that time. People suspected he had been responsible for that as well. Once news broke about Jeffrey Dahmer's arrest, tips poured in from all over the country, and folks thought that Dahmer had traveled around killing people. He had released a statement through his attorney eventually saying that he had made a full confession to law enforcement about his crimes. So basically, like, I'm not responsible for anything outside of this area.
Yeah.
Beginning in the early hours of July 23rd, 1991, Dahmer was questioned by a detective named Patrick Kennedy as to the murders he had committed, and all of this evidence found at his apartment. Over the next 2 weeks, Kennedy, along with another detective named Dennis Murphy, interviewed Dahmer. I mean, it was like 60 hours of interviews. Dahmer waived his right to have a lawyer present throughout the interrogations, adding that he wished to confess all that he had done because, quote, he had created this horror and it only makes sense I do everything to put an end to it. He readily admitted to having murdered 16 young men in Wisconsin since 1987 and had one other victim, Stephen Hicks, that he killed in Ohio in 1978. On July 25th of 1991, Dahmer was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August 22nd, he had been charged with a further 11 murders committed in Wisconsin. On September 14th, investigators in Ohio, having uncovered hundreds of bone fragments in the wooded area behind his old address, Dahmer had confessed that he had actually killed his first victim there. They were formally able to identify 2 molars and a vertebra that belonged to Stephen Hicks. So 3 days later, Dahmer's charged by authorities in the Ohio murder of Stephen Hicks.
Damn.
Investigators were shocked at the extent of Dahmer's crimes and his forthcoming confession. Mortified by the details, everyone was left with questions, mostly, why? Why did you do this?
Yeah, no shit.
And Dahmer said, quote, "It was my way of remembering their appearance, their physical beauty. I also wanted to keep, if I couldn't keep with them with me whole, at least I could keep their skeletons. I even went as far as setting up an altar with 10 different skulls and skeletons, a sort of memorial."
Whatever. He's a piece of shit.
Dahmer was placed in Milwaukee County Jail under protective custody and had a $1 million bond, which seems too low to me.
Yeah. How
Right?
about no bond?
How about no bond? Although there was a mountain of evidence against him, Dahmer entered a not guilty plea by reason of insanity on January 2nd of 1992. Now, most people, Dylan, would probably agree that necrophilia and cannibalism are signs of extreme mental illness and that no sane person is going to do such things, right?
True.
But legal and clinical insanity in the United States are a pretty tricky thing.
Right.
When we get into, is this person legally insane or just criminally insane or, clinically insane? There's a lot of, I guess, gray area. So it can be tough to prove someone doesn't know right from wrong.
Right.
In 1984, Ronald Reagan actually signed in the Insanity Defense Reform Act, which changed the threshold for insanity defenses and made it a lot harder for criminals to plead insanity.
Well, when a jury hears something like this, all the details, they're not going to think that. They're going to think that a sane person couldn't have done this.
Well, this meant a jury would decide if Dahmer spent his whole life in a mental treatment facility or in state prison. Both defense and prosecution called a number of expert witnesses. Dahmer's attorneys hired psychiatrists who diagnosed him with everything from borderline personality disorder to a schizotypal disorder, a necrophilia, and alcoholism diagnosis. The crux of his defense was getting the jury to believe he suffered from schizotypal disorder because it meant he was on the schizophrenia spectrum, and experts argued that if he was on the spectrum, it would be really hard for him to control any necrophiliac urges.
Okay.
The prosecution's witnesses argued that Dahmer was a sexual sadist with antisocial disorder, but legally sane. It was on February 15th of 1992 that a jury agreed with the prosecution, finding Dahmer legally sane and capable of standing trial. Dahmer's victims, their families gave impact statements. Most were heart-wrenching. They just gave the saddest accounts of loss and grief. Errol Lindsay's sister dramatically yelled Satan at Dahmer repeatedly across the courtroom.
Oh, my gosh.
To the point she ended up having to be, escorted out. The judge sentenced Dahmer to life at Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. But first, he was extradited to Ohio, and there he was given another term of life in prison for the murder of Stephen Hicks. The Columbia Correctional Institute is a maximum security prison housing Wisconsin's worst offenders, leaders of street gangs, murderers, rapists. They're all hosting life sentences at this prison as well.
Nice.
So the baddest of the bad.
That's where we should be doing our medical experiments.
Immediately, Dahmer faced threats on his life behind bars. He was separated from the general population for the first year. He had no contact with other inmates. He was allowed to have a television in his cell and was given access to the prison's library. He stated repeatedly that he was remorseful of his crimes. After moving back into a regular, general population, Dahmer said he didn't care if he lived or died. He was given a job as a prison janitor on his cell block, which kind of allowed him to move freely during the day and earn a small amount of money, which of course could be used in the commissary to buy snacks. Jeffrey allegedly found God in prison. He began attending church services and studying the Bible. Dahmer became close with the prison minister, who even wrote a book about his religious discussions with the serial killer. And he said that Dahmer turned to God because he had no one else to turn to, and that Dahmer had asked him, "Is heaven for me too?"
Yeah, you think I can be forgiven for murdering and mutilating and defiling 11 or 14 victims? Or is it 16? Jesus, I can't even keep up.
He's got 17 total.
17? What the hell?
July 3rd of 1994, Osvaldo DeRuthi, a fellow inmate, attempted to slash Dahmer's throat with a razor blade embedded in a toothbrush. Dahmer had superficial wounds from this incident, but did not die from the attack. According to his family, Dahmer was like, "I don't even care, I'm ready to die," when this happened.
So he gave up.
Yeah. I guess it was a few months later, on November 26th of 1994, Dahmer went to a work assignment, and he was accompanied by two other inmates. Christopher Scarver left unsupervised for more than 20 minutes, used a 20-inch metal bar to bludgeon Jeffrey Dahmer to death. Dahmer was found lying on the gym floor, bleeding from his head and face. He was pronounced dead 1 hour after being taken to the hospital. Scarver also attacked the other inmate, Jesse Anderson, that was assigned to work with them that day.
Jesus, he's not a team player.
Scarver, who was serving a life sentence for a 1990 murder, admitted freely that he had attacked Dahmer and Anderson. Thought to be schizophrenic, Scarver told authorities God told him to do it. But it was later revealed that he had hidden the bar in his clothing, suggesting that the attack had been premeditated. Learning of her son's murder, Joyce Dahmer asked the media, quote, "Now is everybody happy? Now that he's bludgeoned to death, is that good enough for everyone?"
Yeah, it's a little bit better, Joyce. Thanks.
Dahmer asked that he be cremated and there be no services. In September of 1995, Dahmer was cremated, and his ashes were divided between Lionel and Joyce. Initially, it was discussed that Jeffrey's brain would be retained for medical research purposes, but Joyce and Lionel could not reach an agreement about this, and it was cremated in December of 1995.
Okay.
Following Jeffrey's arrest and conviction, in November of 1992, the Oxford apartments were demolished in Milwaukee.
And I think that's for the best. Don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anytime something that horrible happens in a building or an establishment, it's just best for the community just to raise it, wipe it out, and move on.
So I have quite a few resources that I have used for my research, including a book called Jeffrey Dahmer, A Terrifying True Story of Rape, Murder, and Cannibalism by Jack Rosewood. And I also used the book Monster, The True Story of Jeffrey Dahmer, which is actually the basis for the Netflix show.
Okay.
And I watched a few true TV shows, read multiple news articles about the case, because it was in the 90s, so there are plenty of news reports.
Well, thank you. I've learned so much about Mr. Dahmer, about some of the stuff he was dealing with, and some things about his circumstance I did not know.
Yeah, I didn't realize that he was such a broke loser. And I didn't know that he was on probation the whole time.
Yeah.
And there were so many turns where this creep could have been stopped, arrested, sent to prison.
Yeah.
And
people rescued, people saved.
Just letting him slip through the cracks time and time again.
Well, thank you for that, Heather. I know you've been working hard, your new full-time job. So glad.
Yeah, we haven't even told our listeners. So
Yeah, tell them.
I started my part-time job at the mortuary, and from there I've been recruited into a full-time position, kind of running some shit, Dylan.
Kind of running some shit.
And that makes me feel good. I suffer from imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, when is everybody going to find out I'm like a huge dumbass?
And so that is...
But I think they already know because they listen to the podcast.
No, you're good. You're great. And I think that's why you're being asked to kind of move up there. And I wish you the best of luck with that. It does affect the podcast to a degree, but we're still going to... Heather's still churning them out.
We're trying.
And we're going to put them out when we can.
Want to be back on schedule. I know things have been crazy for some time, but we are working to maintaining our schedule. And I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that the podcast keeps on trucking.
Well, that's the deal. Instead of just saying, oh, screw that, we got other things going on. We want to continue the podcast.
We love Mountain Murders.
We love Mountain Murders. We love the listeners.
Here in a couple of weeks, celebrating our 4-year podcast anniversary.
What?
December 28th. It's our 4-year anniversary for this podcast.
That is awesome.
I want 4 more, Dylan.
Oh, let's do it.
Let's do it until we run out of true crime in Appalachia.
we're going to do all the damn stories.
We're going to cover all the cases.
All right. So thank everyone. And we're going to try to make a little more content today. So we're just going to keep working.
Yeah, we're about to drop a brand new episode at patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast.
Yes.
If you sign up to be a patron, not only do you support the show, but you are accessing ad-free episodes.
On everything.
Bonus material. There are probably hundreds of episodes that we have not released to the public.
That's what we call
Patreon.
A shit ton.
And you get to be part of our Discord family.
And you get to be part of our Discord family, which is just, I mean, it's like a real family.
Yeah, Patreon is the way to be. And if you want some new built-in besties, you got to join Discord. Because they are some badass people. We love them.
They are. So until next time, next bat channel, same bat channel, same bat time, right,
You are
Heather?
not a good Alfred.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.